when it's on. Kia ora, and welcome to our very first Real Talk. And it's all about Indigenous women, wealth and well-being. And today, I'm Rachel Petero. I am here in the beautiful Pacific shores of New Zealand, and I'll do a little bit more about me in a minute, but I really just want to welcome the beautiful Jace actually from Canada, First Nations, Metis, and so much more, and we'll get to learn. So how are you, Jace?
Kia ora. It's so good to connect with you, Rachel. I'm doing really well. I'm so excited to be invited into this Real Talk. I find we don't have as many opportunities to have real talk, especially about money, especially as Indigenous women. So it was very easy for me to say yes to this conversation because I myself am trying to practice more real talk about money myself.
Yeah, wonderful. And it was interesting as I reached out to about 12 different women from all of the countries that I could think of and who I've connected with. It was really easy for them as well to say yes. And I think that's a sign.
It is. We're looking for these spaces. We're looking for safe spaces to have real conversations about the ins and outs of money. And the more we know, the better off we'll be.
Yeah. So let's get into it. Let's deep dive into the question that I posed to all of you, which was, let's have some honest conversations about, and there's lots of terminology, but you know, it is about money at the end of the day, and it's linked to also some of our beliefs about money. Mm-hmm. And I know that when I returned, you know, I've been overseas for 16 years. When I returned, what I really noticed was there wasn't a lot of conversations, open conversations about money when we were together as women. And so that really baffled me because in the UK, in the Middle East, you know, it was just a normal conversation. What's your experience been, Jace, in terms of that piece?
Yeah, so I'm a Metis woman. I grew up in a household with majority of the time a single income. So money was always tight. My stepdad was a non-Indigenous man. Money was very, very important to him. And it wasn't so much for my mother, where I get my indigeneity from. And so money always seemed to kind of have two faces to it. Both the side where it was irrelevant from my mom's perspective, and then the most prized thing you could have from my dad's perspective. So my own concepts with money are kind of bipolar. I both am very committed to investing in myself and trying to pay myself first. And I've always been a saver. I've always had at least 3 jobs, knowing that I was going to have to be financially independent in order to go to school, you know, step out in my own, get a home and all of that. And yet also not at all motivated by the money. I've always been attracted to the work opportunities and the things that I get to learn. And at a number of points in my life, I had to choose to take the path that would bring me closer to my values and let go of pretty good money in order to get there. And now I work daytime in a place where we're trying to reshape the future of commerce. So money is literally all around me in all the conversations that I have. And I'm an entrepreneur myself, so I try my own side hustles to generate new streams of money. I particularly love passive income streams of money that I don't really have to break a sweat for, and that I can kind of just set it and forget it and, you know, watch it kind of accumulate. But those are harder to come by. So my own experiences of money have been starting in a kind of toxic space. Like the first thing that I ever remember hearing about money is, do you honestly think we have money for that? You know, asking for basketball shoes so that I could play on the basketball team. And I really just felt, and probably as a stepchild where this was most informed by, like, that my time and space took money of other people's, and that I had to be very careful about what I asked for, so I wasn't drawing on somebody else's resources. And so I was always very aware of what I was asking for, what I was costing people, and it didn't show up in a good way. I would think about things not at all aligned to my culture about sharing money and ensuring that wealth is redistributed and part of the community, that we help each other out. My household, it was much more about being independent, not being a strain on anybody. And so I've always had a really interesting approach with how I spend my money. And it was largely shaped as how I was raised as a very little girl, and not within my culture. So I'm trying to decolonize my sense of money. And that's a very active journey that I'm on today.
Yeah, wow, what a word, decolonize. It's a big topic in New Zealand, as you can imagine. And
Yes.
so thank you for sharing all of that. And just to break down some of what I heard, and let's break down that story, because I loved how you that bipolar side of understanding money, mother, father, different, and what I heard was different values around money. And so understanding that as a child, how was that turned up in a positive way for you? Because there's always both sides of the coin, aren't there?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And that's what I'm trying to pull from that as well, just so that I can have a positive and healthy view on money, because I really do find your mindset towards money shapes all of your experiences around it. You can have a deficit kind of perspective, and it feels like you're managing the poverty versus the wealth that is there. And that shows up in all kinds of ways, even in your relationships. You track, I bought the coffee last time, you should be buying the coffee this time. And that's how I was raised. I remember at a very, very young age, and it was quite a traumatic experience to find my stepdad had counted out on a notepad what he thought my mom would inherit from her mother when she passed, and how that money would be spent in his household.
Wow.
And that for me was just so ugly and inappropriate, that I really had to kind of distance myself from any of that kind of energy, because I knew right then when I saw that's not how I saw money. Money was the thing that society said we needed, but really I didn't find joy in the things that most people find joy in when they spend their money. So like for me now, like how that shows up in habits is that I don't find shopping enjoyable in the same ways as maybe others do. And I'm very critical with how I do spend my money and where I invest it. So every purchase is a very conscientious decision. And that's become more so as of late. When I talk about decolonizing money, I think about every dollar I spend as a vote that I have. I either something I want to see more of in the world, or I refrain from spending that money because I don't want to vote for that. So I'm trying to shop Indigenous owned, Indigenous led, Indigenous made products, shop locally from other women entrepreneurs, and really understand who I'm buying from and the corporations behind that and where they invest their money or don't. And then everything that I bring into my home has to add value or has to add joy. So because growing up, I didn't have a lot of money, and I was responsible from a very young age to kind of outfit myself with basketball shoes, as I said. I've always just tried to really spend my money on the things that I love or that really served a purpose. And anything else that didn't kind of have that spark joy that we hear about, or had multiple purpose, I really asked myself, do I need this? As an example, like, do we need toothbrush holders, or do we just need a cup perhaps to put our toothbrush in? We've been sold so many products we think we need, but do we really need them? Are they serving us? Do they bring us joy? And do they have more than one purpose? Those are the kinds of questions I ask myself before I spend my money and vote with my dollar.
Yeah, and that's such a tweetable thing, isn't it? Every on Jace, actually, everyone go on to Twitter, and because I think that is such I just love that whole concept of every dollar is a vote for good, a vote for sustainable, a vote for Indigenous, a vote for doing more with one product than just, the toothbrush holder.
That's right. Yeah. And like, how empowering is that to think about that? Even if you only get to manage 50 votes because you only have $50 to your name, that is still 50 votes. And you could distribute that across a few things or intentionally put it in one pot. But it really helped me feel more empowered as a spender. And we know women are the primary spenders. We're the ones making decisions from the grocery store all the way to what programs we roll our children in or not.
Yes.
So I think if we see ourselves not just as the people that are managing the family's finances and doing the grocery shopping, but that's the way we can show up as active citizens every day, it's a different mindset. And suddenly you empower yourself to really reconsider the impact you can have in the world as just an individual.
Yeah, fabulous. Oh, golds of nuggets of great empowering words from beautiful Jace, actually. And please do follow Jace. She's like very vocal and very present on social media. So that's sort of how it's impacted you and shifted, your mindset. Has that been recent, that sort of shift, or has that been with you as you've gone on this journey?
I definitely think it's more recent than not. I think there was an element of it as a kid. We didn't have a lot of money, and so I could never keep up with the trends. I couldn't wear the Nike tearaways that were cool when I was 10. I didn't have the name brand shoes that everybody else had. And so most often we shopped secondhand. And it helped me just recognize that I could use that to my advantage and I could create a style and I could kind of just choose to use that as a way to help me, stand out and have my own character and not just look like everybody else. So there was elements of that as a kid. But obviously I'm still young and I want to be socially accepted and part of the in group. And so that's why I went to work. And so from as young as I can remember, I was babysitting. I very quickly learned how I could make a lot of money really fast and how I needed to protect myself in that. So what I mean by that is I remember a number of occasions babysitting for people and they would go out and they would party and they would come back and they didn't have the cash to pay and they said they would pay me in the morning, they just need to go out to the ATM. And but that meant I had to go knock on the door the next day to get paid. And that made me really uncomfortable because asking for the money I was owed and that I earned was hard. Like I didn't want to talk about money. I didn't want to even ask for the money that I'd earned. And so I realized it was easier to get paid up front than it was to get paid in the end or not paid at all. And so I used to ask for like almost a down payment in a way for babysitting services for big nights like the New Year's and Valentine's Days. You pay me half up front and then I know you're serious and you're going to pay me and then you can pay me the rest after. And I 9 and 10 doing that. So I started to get a little bit of a voice and an opinion around money only because I was finding I was being stiffed and not taken seriously, probably because I was so young, but also because it made people uncomfortable to talk about money. My assumption is those families that I was babysitting for were embarrassed that they didn't have the cash and they didn't want to have to call the next morning to admit, that they didn't bring the money home. And so, but I would say, as I grew up and then as I became a mom and I realized how my spending was being viewed by my daughter, it really cemented that every purchase was a choice and a vote, and that I could model to her where she could invest her resources and what's a distraction. What are we marketed to believe we need, which are real wants and desires and are keeping us from the wealth that we really need. And then to get to the real talk of all of this too, I had a personal health scare in the spring of 2018. I was told that I had about 3 months ahead of me before I would be diagnosed officially with breast cancer in both breasts, and that if I had the money, I could opt in for a preventative double mastectomy and not have to go through chemo, radiation, and anything that comes with cancer. But I would have to fund that. That the Canadian healthcare system would not cover that because it's preventative, and I hadn't definitively had cancer, or wait and then be put into the system. But they're so backlogged, they didn't know when I would get a surgery and how far I'd have to go into the experience of cancer treatment before I would get the care that I needed.
Yes.
And so the question was, do you want to spend about $20,000 to $30,000 in diagnostic testing and preventative elective surgeries, or reconstruction, and spend this money and put my family into significant debt to do it? And that really hammered home what money could be for or must be for. And never had I considered budgeting for my health or a rainy day fund for health, because I live in Canada and healthcare is supposed to be covered and free.
Yes.
Until I kind of bumped up to the part of the system where it wasn't. And then I had to take significant amount of time off. So there was, wages lost. And then because it was elective, insurance didn't come through. So there was no employment insurance during that time. And so the bills just became exorbitant. But, which path do you choose? The path that requires you to spend more money than you have in order to guarantee your health, or save the money because you've been raised to save all your money and not spend any of it and see it as a, thing that's supposed to be protected, and then go down this path where, who knows what the other end looks like.
Yes.
And what the real true costs would have been. So that was a life-changing, as you can imagine, experience to go through. And it tested my relationship with my partner, because he was the sole income provider and might have to have been for the long term. We didn't know. We had no answers before we had to make the decisions and spend the money. But I'll tell you that it was the best decision I ever made, because it was about building for the long term and making sure that I would be here for my daughter 20, 30, 40 years from now. Yes. And that I learned that money could be used to spend on yourself in a way that is actually taking care of your well-being, which I don't think I ever believed previously. It just wasn't within my wheelhouse to think that way. So a lot's changed for me since then. Yeah. And even as far as we've decided that every year we have a healthcare spending account, which is just a portion of our income that we dedicate to spend on our health and preventative measures. So anything from camping gear to swimming lessons to, chiropractic and massage, just so that we can put our values and our spending more in line. So yes. I think health was always something I valued, but I took it for granted. And now I realize it's something I actually have to invest in. Yeah. And trying to put my money there again, like a vote for my own health. It's really reshaped how I think about spending.
Yes. Wow. And what a life lesson, a life lesson in how important it is to vote for your health through investment and through really understanding the value that money can bring to your life. And so thank you for sharing that really powerful example. I didn't know that you'd been through that experience. And so, I really acknowledge you for living your values, living your voting privileges in life, and taking it so seriously that it has changed your life and the life of your family and.
Yeah. And it's the things you hear, but you're like, oh, I've got 20 years before I need to think about that. But I didn't have a will, I was a mother and I have dependents, but I didn't have a will. I thought that was what you did when you were old. And it wasn't until I realized, like, no, you need to have this. You have no idea what could happen. And we don't, like, I don't like to dwell on like the what ifs and, worry a lot. But I realized that, like, I didn't have to worry if I just did these things and took care of them. And now gifting people their wills is like my favorite gift to give.
Oh, wow.
Really great software that's trying to make that easier for people. Not an ad, I do not work for them, but willful.com. You can literally complete your will in 15 minutes through an app on your phone, sitting on the couch, and then you have unlimited edits to that over a lifetime. All you have to do is print it out and have someone sign it, and it's a legitimate document. But I'd put it off forever, thinking now I need to spend money on a lawyer and take time off to go to these appointments, and what do I know about what goes in a will? But it made it so easy that I just feel like I honestly sleep better at night knowing they're taking care of that. And it's amazing, like, how many people have celebrated with me, like how good it feels to have taken care of that, especially because it was so easy to do that. It's my new favorite gift to give at a baby shower.
Yeah, what a great gift. Again, really being intentional about what you give and how you give it and the value that gives others.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm really hearing, some great things with what you've just shared, that are gems to take away for whoever's listening to this, whether you be a man or a woman, actually. And one of them is around really focusing on things like health and not leaving it to the universe, actually really owning that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I did have someone specifically guide me to name what my values were and then ask how they show up in my budget. And I had never thought that money should come from your decisions around money should come with your values. I thought it was like, you take care of your needs, and then whatever left over is like free for all. And then when I looked, like, I was like, oh, I make a lot of arbitrary decisions around my money, or I'm not really thinking about it. And so the opportunity for intentionality was pretty evident for myself. And mostly, like, I think people that have always kind of struggled paycheck to paycheck don't feel like they have the space to make those kinds of choices for themselves. But that's the belief I lived under. And then I realized, like, no, you really do have more choices than you realize. And it's just so much of it we just do on autopilot. We don't even think of the opportunity we have.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing actually is about shifting stuff that might be unconsciously going on for you and actually making that conscious about, how values actually show up in your financial, in your world of money. And who would have thought you could overlay those two things?
It's like everything we've been raised to believe about money, right? Is that it needs to be logical, it's black and white, there's only one answer, there's a process, there's an institution, everything's decided for you, there's good advice and bad advice, and there's no room for gray. And that's not how I operate. That's not reflective of who I am. So I always kind of believed it and didn't know how to quite fit myself into it. So I didn't talk about it amongst my girlfriends. You don't talk about your salary in Canada. That's a very, like, social faux pas. So you have no idea where you are in relation to anyone ever. And you don't know how to ask for help. And so I didn't have a lot of guides in this, but I really decided I wanted to learn and lean into this. And as someone who's so connected to entrepreneurs, like, money is something we have to manage, and how we spend that money and what our business contributes to the world and how it has the potential to help others make money can be values driven.
Yes. 100%. 100%. I've learned that the hard way as well sometimes, and they have been the best lessons. So sort of we're in the now, we're in sort of your present life, and entrepreneurship is definitely part of your role in the corporate world, but it's also, you've got these amazing side hustles going on. And so, what you tell us about those and how they impact your mindset, your world.
Yeah, it's I think it's like my hobby is to work, and that's something I'm trying to work through actively right now. And I've always needed to work, and so I busied myself with work. I've been very fortunate for most of the jobs that I occupied for any length of period of time. It was really connected to my values. I felt like it was making a difference in the world. So pouring 80 hours into something just felt like the right thing to do. And I think I've started to kind of trying to understand that my definition of who I am and my value isn't tied to my job title, and it isn't all about what's on my business card. And so I've ironically, and this is where I still have room to grow, I used side hustles and small businesses off the side of my desk to kind of help me play in different fields and spaces that are of interest to me. Where I'm trying to get with that is to actually not make everything I do about making money, that it's okay to have hobbies that aren't income generating, and that you can do things purely for pleasure even if you're not good at them, and there's importance in having time for that in your life. So that's an active work in progress for me. I am by no means good at that yet. But I have experimented quite a bit with launching different side hustles and businesses. So the first is that I consult quite often. My background is in education and working with youth that are underrepresented and undersupported. And so I do a lot of consulting for youth-led organizations around how they can make more inclusive practices and really rethink how they operate as businesses in a way that best serves youth. So I do that off the side of my desk. And then I also am in the process of launching an Indigenous women-owned home decor line with 2 other Indigenous women who would absolutely be excellent guests on the Real Talk series. And really, we just recognize that there's a gap in the market, and that what is sold to us that is, kind of Indigenous is very kind of tokenist Indigenous stuff that really doesn't feel like who we are. And it's a little bit too direct and in your face with, for us, the medicine wheel is like printed on everything. And it really isn't reflective of who we are as women. So we called that company the Matriarchs Company.
I love the name.
Thank you. The vision we have for ourselves is that, one day we could have many matriarchs with their own distinct lines in this homeware collection that we have. And we've been very intentional about going slow with that business, to not race into it, to not just do it for the money. So we haven't made $1 yet, full disclosure. It is not a generating business today, but it also hasn't cost us any money to get where we're at either. And that's also really part of what we're trying to do. As I mentioned earlier, I'm very interested in the concept of passive income generation. So you can kind of set it and forget it. So all of the products that we are designing will be print on demand products. So we actually don't produce those products until we know there's a buyer. And that was a conscientious decision for us, so that no product ever goes to the landfill because we can't sell it, and that we only really are producing what the world wants. And we can use that feedback to help us guide new product ideas. Also, so that we don't have to store, 100 different variations of duvet covers in anyone's home, but really there's partner organizations we can work with that just print that product and ship that product when we have the buyer. So they come through our store to buy it, and we just have the money show up in our bank account, and we split it 3 ways at the end of the month. So that's the goal. The goal is to launch in 2020. And we use it as a chance too, just to connect as real women and have real honest conversations and set goals as business partners and coach each other in that. So, we meet once a week, and it's social. Sometimes we have to remember and remind ourselves to business, because it's easy to have conversation and tea. But you know, those are the things that are really exciting me right now, because they're testing my understanding and really helping me on my journey unpack what that looks like. And then something I didn't have a lot of practice on was seeing how people have a positive co-working relationship around money. Money was a fight constantly between my parents, and so now I have business partners, and I've not had that before. So
Yeah.
it's just a chance to really kind of learn and practice some new skills around that too.
Wonderful. So, you know, those side hustles that actually, again, are aligning with your, you know, your money mindset, your Indigenous practices, but also your cultural integrity around what business needs to be in, you know, the next decade, the next century. And so, you know, congratulations on living by your intentional values.
Well, thank you, Rachel. I really appreciate that. Like I said, it's a work in progress for me. So even just getting to talk about it makes it more real, you know,
Yeah.
and helps me kind of push myself further. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And so, you know, has anyone ever said to you that you can't be that, you know, what do you think? What are you doing? Who said you can't? Who said you can't be a millionaire? Has anyone ever said that to you?
Yeah, this is a conversation I've been having a lot lately. I do a lot of work in social impact investments, and talking about, you know, the future of money and wealth distribution, and moving away from economic prosperity to economic well-being, which New Zealand is doing so beautifully, and I believe leading the whole world in. And so there's a debate often, right? Is like, can Indigenous people, Indigenous women be millionaires? Is that the right thing? And is that, you know, reflective of kind of a more capitalistic worldview? Where do we sit in this? And so that's a question like I really am trying to unpack for myself too. So here's like where I'm at with it at this
Yeah.
point in time.
Great.
So one of my biggest messages when I'm working in Indigenous communities to help inspire other entrepreneurs is it's okay to make money doing what you love. And I think that is something that is culturally not ingrained in us. There was never really a need to make money doing what you love. The community inherently would take care of you.
Yes.
And so there's not a lot of practice with that. And then, you know, doing what you love often is so connected to culture that it's inappropriate to sell your cultural practices and whatnot. So then the borders become really gray. And so it's easier just to step out than to go down the wrong path. But I think it's really important for people to know that it's okay to make money doing what you love, and that it doesn't have to feel like work to be of value and to be compensated. And so then how much money can you make doing what you love is the question, right? And why not? Why not? Like, is, I guess my response is, why can't Indigenous people be millionaires? There's still ways that millionaires can be more socially responsible millionaires. How you make that million, I think, is more the question versus can you make that million?
Right.
Because let's be honest, at least, you know, in the regions that I spend a lot of my time working in, being a millionaire today isn't what it used to be.
No.
You know, you almost have to be a millionaire to live in some of our urban centers. I think the last report I heard is you have to make it minimum $40 an hour to even own any, or not own, but live in any place in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you're definitely pushing, you know, into the six digit figures in order to be able to live in places like that. Do I think that's right? No. But if others can be millionaires in order to do that, why can't Indigenous people too?
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's the reframing that we can have as Indigenous women. It's not about, you know, why not. It's really about how.
Right.
Really about how you make that, whatever,
Yeah.
1 million, 10 million, 100 million, whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it's about really understanding so what I know from, and thank you for that compliment about New Zealand and how we are leading the world. And I think we still have a way to go, but I do believe that it is because of our Indigenous Māori values and way of life. Actually, it's, you know, people go, oh, but what's, you know, how do we do this? I said, well, it's not just about doing it, it's about living it. It's about living in that place of seeing the world through a lens that isn't Western, that isn't imperial, that isn't, you know, colonial. And it does look different, it does feel different. And so what I know is that it's never just about the one thing, it's never just about money. And so as long as everything is in balance, yeah, isn't that what the rest of the world is looking for? So when you have the social capital, and when you have the environmental thinking, just like you have about, you know, where am I going to spend my money? I'm going to spend it here where it's very consumer led. It's going to go to the dump anyway, you know, and we're adding to what's happening in the world, versus you know, choosing an Indigenous product that is being built from the land, that is supporting a whānau, a family. And we're also looking at all of these other dimensions as Indigenous. We're looking at our spiritual connectedness with money. We're looking at the emotional connection, and we're looking at our overall health and well-being. So, you know, when you've got all of that going on, linked to, when it's not the primary focus, is what I'm trying to say. Is that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And so I'm very privileged to work with entrepreneurs every day. And one of the things that I've noticed, particularly within Indigenous entrepreneurs, and then even more so with women Indigenous entrepreneurs, is sometimes we forget to speak to the impacts that our businesses and our money is having. We don't always have the language necessarily to show up and show how our business is equal to, if not more impactful than somebody else's business, because we might not have that jargon. But I have yet to meet an Indigenous entrepreneur that isn't investing in their community, that isn't truly a social enterprise, whether or not they consider themselves, because they're thinking about their full supply chain. They know exactly how their product shows up in the community. They're hiring the people in their community. They're sponsoring the lacrosse and the hockey team. Like, they're doing all of these things that non-Indigenous businesses have a terminology for, that, that when you start to measure them on equal footings, you're like, oh my gosh, you're actually having a far deeper impact. Your business is this much more as a result of what you're doing. But we are a very humble, and we just assume that everybody is making these values-based decisions, and that every other good business has probably gotten to where they are by having deep, lasting partnerships and making decisions for 7 generations. And that's our differentiator and our selling factor. And we have to be willing to and able to speak to some of that in order to further our investment potential, and really sell people on our worldview of commerce, so that more people can kind of deploy the same strategies. So
Yeah.
I often think like a lot of my work ends up being a bit of a bridge between those two worlds, and helping kind of show people how, one way we say this in a Western context is also showing up in, a more cultural, traditional context, and had started there and is rooted there. And it's only now that people are coming back full circle to these models that have sustained us for millennia.
Yes. So, what I'm hearing is, let's get some language that really works for us, that really works to us, that talks to the value. And, I would go back to storytelling. Telling the story is one of the most impactful ways that women, we're talking to our Indigenous women, and don't underestimate your story.
Right.
And don't, and really, again, value that every moment of your life has brought you here, and that someone will connect with one part or one step of your story that will empower them to go and do what you've done.
That's right. That's really, if I've learned anything at all, is the power of telling my own story has helped me get to the next stepping stone and open that next door, meet that next right person. That wasn't true for myself when I was keeping my story to myself. So I couldn't agree with that thinking more. And language is powerful. So you might not have all of the innovation jargon, but plain speak, people understand plain speak, right? So if your business is having an impact in all of these different ways you can list them. You know,
Listen.
and that's actually one of the things that I most valued about New Zealand's approach with their budget, was that it was plain language, and you weren't afraid to say, you know what, we actually just care that people are happy. You know, I feel like, you know, the dominant culture would find some other fancy terminology for that and coin it as a term so it sounds like business speak. But like, let's just be honest and clear about what we're trying to achieve. And when I look to the Indigenous community, it's like they want to know that they're solving real problems, they're having an impact on their community, and they're making their family proud. And maybe fourth, maybe fifth, maybe sixth, it's about how much money they're making.
Yes, exactly. And I think that is a fundamental difference between Indigenous and non-Indigenous. It's never our priority. Yet it needs to be somewhere in that
Right.
process. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's so exciting, and I just love your language. I must say, I just love your language. And then I went on and had a look at some of your, you know, sort of your keynote speaking. So, you know, it's and hearing how you tell your story. I mean, wow, so powerful. So I'm just saying, keep telling your story, Jace.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you.
And as we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd really love to leave? You know, one of those gold nuggets, because I've heard so much in this, and I am thinking perfect platform to start the real talk, like your personal story, your giving, your vulnerability to give so much of yourself to others has been, you know, I couldn't have planned it better. So thank you. Is there anything from your perspective that you'd really just like to finish off with?
I think the concept of it's okay to make money doing what you love, and that not everything you love has to make money is really probably the best place for me to land, because it's the thing that I've come to learn, and it's also the thing I'm trying to learn. I think leaving it there is the best place.
Wonderful. And I just want to say, where did you get your beautiful earrings?
Oh, happy to share. These are made by an Indigenous man in Toronto. His name's Warren Stephen Scott, and he makes some incredible jewelry. I have a couple of his pieces now, some with mirrors, all different colors, but he's an incredible Indigenous designer here in Canada that launched an earring line last year and is doing incredibly well with his new work. So
wonderful. So I'll get you to send me the link to maybe where he is, so that when we actually share all of the series of interviews, people can just go there. And how can we support you, Jace, in your side hustles, in your work, your amazing work as the Indigenous leader for Shopify? How can we support you?
Self-identify yourself as an Indigenous woman entrepreneur. Tell the world that you're there. People are looking to count us and see us be successful, but it really just takes us to put up our hands and say that we exist, we proudly exist, and that we have something to offer the world. So you can follow me on social media on all platforms. I'm Jace, actually. And then I have my own shop where my consulting business is at jaceactually.com.
Wonderful. And if you're ever in Vancouver, look up Jace. She's an amazing host. I've been there just recently at the World Indigenous Business Forum last year, and that's where we connected. So, you know, and also thank you to our wonderful ambassador. What's Daniel's? Yeah. I know he's moved out, but
your former New Zealand High Commissioner connected us originally. Daniel Millsop said that Rachel was a woman I needed to meet in New Zealand if I really wanted to connect with strong Maori women, and he was not wrong. So that's why I ended up at the World Indigenous Business Forum, which thanks to Daniel.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I'm going to close us off here because I know you've got a busy day, so have I, because that's what we do as Indigenous women and in business, entrepreneurs. Put your hands up, ladies. And I just really loved the conversation. Thank you so much from, you know, one Indigenous sister to another for just being you. Jace, actually.
Miigwech. Thank you, Rachel.
Ka kite anō. We'll see you soon.